Somewhere in the Amazon River, something is moving through water so dark that visibility drops to almost nothing within arm's reach. The open ocean feels dangerous because it is vast, but most of the time you can still see what is coming. The Amazon is different. It is a flooded brown black world where predators evolved specifically for darkness. More than 2,700 species of fish share this river system. Bull sharks swim thousands of kilometers inland. Electric animals generate fields powerful enough to stop a human heart. Some fish navigate entirely through electricity, building a map of the river without using vision at all. And once every year, the river rises high enough to flood directly into the rainforest canopy. Fish move between the trees. Caimans drift through submerged forest. Predators begin hunting in places that were dry land only weeks earlier. The Amazon is not one river, but a system of more than 1,000 tributaries, draining an area roughly the size of the continental United States. Tonight, we descend into the darkest parts of the Amazon to understand why this river produces a category of danger the open ocean physically cannot create. If this is your kind of thing, hit like and subscribe. It costs nothing and it keeps this channel going. And drop a comment below. Are you watching this winding down for the night or watching this during your active day? Now, let's enter the river system where evolution learned how to hunt without light. Before any animal enters the story, the river has already made the first decision. It has taken light away, not all at once and not everywhere in the same manner, but through a vast design of current, mineral, leaf, rain, and stone, until water becomes less like a surface than a moving veil. The Amazon is often spoken of as one river, yet that name gathers an entire continent of water into a single breath. More than 1,100 tributaries drain into it, drawing from a basin roughly the size of the contiguous United States, each stream carrying the memory of the ground it crossed. Some begin in high mountains where rock is ground into powder. Some slip through forest soils rich with fallen leaves. Some travel over ancient shields of stone, so old that the water seems almost emptied of age, clear in appearance yet shaped by immensities beneath it. These waters do not arrive as one substance. They enter the basin as three different worlds, moving beside and through one another. White water carries the pulverized Andes in suspension, thick with pale sediment and nutrients, turning the main channel brown and opaque. Black water comes from forests, where plant matter decays slowly beneath heat and rain, staining the flow with humic acids until it resembles dark tea poured under a dim sky. Clear water runs from billion-year-old shield rock, cleaner to the eye, but still part of the same enormous breathing system. The meeting of these waters is not simple mixing. Temperature, acidity, mineral load, speed, and density all shape how one current accepts or resists another. In some stretches, two rivers travel side by side as if separated by glass, their colors touching without surrendering. Beneath the surface, that boundary is not only visual, it changes what can live there, what can feed there, what can sense there, and what must avoid crossing into chemistry it was never shaped to endure. In the main whitewater channel, the world closes almost immediately. Visibility can fall to 20 to 60 centimeters, roughly the length of a human forearm. A hand lowered into the current fades before the arm is fully extended. A paddle disappears below the surface and returns from a place the eye cannot follow. In blackwater tributaries, where the forest has steeped the river in organic stain, sight can collapse even further until the water seems to hold depth without offering distance. This is the foundation beneath every later encounter. In open blue water, danger often has shape before it has contact. A large shark, a drifting fin, a pale movement beneath the surface, all may announce themselves through space. The Amazon removes that interval. It shortens the distance between presence and touch. It allows bodies to share the same water without recognition, separated not by miles, but by a thin brown curtain that the eye cannot pass. So the river's first power is not speed, size, or violence. It is concealment, made from geology, forest chemistry, and suspended earth. Long before teeth, venom, voltage, or muscle enter the current, the Amazon has already built the condition that gives them meaning. It has made a world where almost everything important happens just beyond sight. A faint electrical pulse passes through the water before the animal itself becomes real. It is a private signal released into mud dark current, spreading outward in a shape only one body knows how to read. Long before a fin or head can be separated from the brownness, the river has already been measured by voltage. The creature that makes this field is called an electric eel, but the name is a loose old mistake. It is not an eel at all. It belongs among the knife fishes, closer in ancestry to catfish and carp than to the long marine animals its common name suggests. Most of its length is not built for ordinary swimming. About 80% of the body is occupied by three specialized electric organs: the main organ, Hunter's organ, and Sachs organ. Inside those organs are approximately 6,000 electrocytes, flattened cells shaped like tiny disks, each holding a small difference in charge. Alone, one cell would mean almost nothing. Together, when commanded by the nervous system, they fire in the same instant. The result is thousands of small voltages becoming one animal decision, one pulse released through water that carries it farther than air ever could. Most of the time, the discharge is weak, less than 10 volts, and it is not used as a weapon. It is touch without contact. The fish sends a low pulse outward and reads how the field bends around roots, stones, buried prey, moving bodies, and other living things. Where the eye receives almost nothing, the electric eel builds a map from disturbance, sensing volume and motion in a darkness that never needs to become visible. The stronger discharge belongs to another rhythm entirely. In Electrophorus varii, formerly recognized as a distinct species only in 2019, the hunting shock can reach 860 volts, the highest biological discharge yet documented in any animal. For millions of years, it had been living in the basin under a name that blurred it with others, carrying its power unnoticed by classification, known to the river long before it was separated by science. At close range, the shock does more than stun. It reaches into the prey's muscles and forces them to contract, briefly making the hidden body twitch against its own will. That involuntary movement betrays position. The eel can then strike toward the exact place where life has revealed itself, not through sight, but through the body's electrical surrender. Even death does not immediately empty the organs of their danger. Researchers have recorded functional shocks from specimens that had already died. The animal's solitude is not absolute. In 2021, researchers documented electric eels hunting together, driving small fish into dense balls before releasing coordinated high voltage discharges. The scene carries none of the open chase of a visible predator. It is choreography in stained water, a collective pressure forming around prey that cannot understand the shape closing upon it. The electric eel does not overcome blindness. It has made blindness irrelevant. In this river, vision is only one possible language. Electricity becomes outline, distance, warning, weapon, and map. The animal moves through a world closed to the eye, while the dark water keeps answering in signals too subtle for human skin to translate. At night, the Amazon gains a second current, one that has no surface and leaves no ripple. It passes between submerged roots, around fallen branches, through drifting leaves and suspended minerals, carried not by the force of water alone, but by the bodies of fish quietly broadcasting into the dark. Across the basin, weakly electric fish are more diverse than in any other river system on Earth. Among them are over 200 species of knife fish, each producing a continuous low voltage field from specialized tissues arranged along the body. These animals are called gymnotiforms, and their electricity is not the same drama as the violent strike of the electric eel. It is softer, steadier, almost conversational, a constant presence released into water that gives it room to travel. Their electric organs arose through a separate evolutionary path from the high voltage species already encountered. Life arrived at the same answer more than once because the problem was everywhere. In a river where sight fails quickly, the body needed another way to measure nearness, movement, identity, and space. So muscle cells were transformed across generations into living batteries, and the water became an extension of the nervous system. Each species sends its signal at a slightly different frequency. Some pulse in sharp bursts, others hum in steady waves. This separation allows many kinds of electric fish to occupy the same channel without blurring one another's messages. Beneath the brown surface, the river functions like a hidden radio spectrum, with each animal holding its own narrow band. A fish moving through the current is not silent to others like it. It is marked by rhythm, frequency, and field shape, a small electrical signature carried through the basin's dark rooms. The water itself helps preserve this language. Dissolved organic matter, mineral ions, decayed plant compounds, and fine sediment alter conductivity, allowing electric signals to move more clearly than they would in purer, emptier freshwater. The chemistry of the Amazon does not merely conceal life from the eye, it creates conditions in which other senses become unusually powerful. A signal released from one body can reach through the stained current and return altered, carrying information about what interrupted it. After sunset, this hidden activity rises. Researchers measuring background electromagnetic conditions in Amazon waterways have recorded increases in ambient electric field intensity as nocturnal species become active. The change is not loud in any human way. It is a measurable thickening of signals, a night chorus made of voltage rather than sound, spreading through water already filled with chemical traces and living motion. The result is a river that cannot be understood as mute darkness. Hundreds of animals are continually sensing, answering, avoiding, identifying, and approaching one another through fields humans cannot perceive. Their world is built from pulses that pass through skin, branch, mud, scale, and current. To the eye, the water may seem closed and unreadable. To the fish inside it, the same darkness is textured with information, layered with messages, and alive with invisible exchange. From high above the canopy, some Amazon tributaries appear almost unreal, dark ribbons moving through green forest with the color of steeped tea. Others carry a pale brown heaviness, broad and opaque, while nearby channels reflect the sky in muted green blue clarity. The basin does not share one kind of water. It carries several chemistries at once, each shaping life in its own quiet manner. The Blackwater rivers are among the strangest. The Rio Negro, largest tributary of the Amazon by volume, carries approximately 27 million gallons of water every second through northern South America. Seen from above, its surface can resemble black glass or stout beer beneath clouded light. Scooped into a clear container, the water glows reddish brown, colored not by mud, but by dissolved organic compounds drifting invisibly through it. Those compounds come from the forest itself. Rain falls through layers of leaves, roots, bark, and soil, slowly pulling humic and fulvic acids from decomposing plant matter. The chemistry is similar to what stains brewed tea, dark amber in a cup, though here it operates across rivers hundreds of meters wide. In some tributaries, the concentration becomes so dense that sunlight fades quickly beneath the surface, absorbed into water already thick with dissolved carbon from countless seasons of decay. This chemistry changes more than color. Blackwater rivers often range between a pH of 3.5 and 6, acidic enough in some regions to approach the chemistry of diluted vinegar. Many bacteria, parasites, and microscopic organisms struggle to survive there. Nutrients remain scarce. Fish communities become sparse and highly specialized, shaped less by abundance than by endurance. Indigenous communities have long called these waterways rios de foam, rivers of hunger, because the water appears immense while offering surprisingly little to eat. Scientists studying these systems have compared some blackwater tributaries to slightly contaminated distilled water, among the cleanest natural waters on Earth in terms of suspended biological material. Yet that purity carries a strange hostility. The same acidity that suppresses microbial life also narrows the range of organisms capable of enduring it. Life persists, but selectively, filtered through chemistry as carefully as stone filters rain. Elsewhere, the main whitewater channels behave in the opposite manner. Sediment washed down from the Andes fills the current with suspended minerals and organic nutrients, creating fertile conditions for enormous biological productivity. The river becomes dense with microscopic life, fish, drifting plant matter, and the invisible movement of decomposition. What the eye perceives as murk is partly the visible trace of mountain ranges being ground slowly into liquid earth. Near Manaus, two of these worlds meet. The black Rio Negro joins the sandy Solimoens, and for approximately 6 kilometers, the rivers travel side by side without fully mixing. One remains dark as polished wood, the other pale and clouded with Andean sediment. Temperature, density, and flow speed hold them apart in a visible seam stretching across the surface like a boundary drawn by hand. Beneath that boundary, biology changes with the chemistry. Fish adapted to acidic black water often cannot survive in sediment rich whitewater, while species shaped by mineral heavy currents struggle in the sparse conditions of the darker tributaries. The river separates life not through walls of stone or distance, but through invisible differences dissolved into the water itself, turning chemistry into geography. There comes a point each year when familiar ground begins to disappear quietly beneath the water. First, the lowest roots vanish, then fallen leaves, then entire pathways between trees. The transformation does not arrive as catastrophe. It arrives as rhythm, repeating across the basin with such consistency that nearly every living thing has shaped part of its existence around it. The Amazon rises between 30 and 50 feet above its dry season level during the annual Várzea flood pulse. The word Várzea comes from Portuguese floodplain forests, though the scale of the event stretches beyond ordinary language. At peak inundation, more than 135,000 square miles of forest floor disappear beneath the river and its tributaries, an area roughly equivalent to Germany submerged under warm, moving water. For months at a time, trees remain partially underwater. Some species endure submersion for as many as 230 days each year, their trunks standing in brown current longer than in open air. Rather than resisting the flood, they reproduce within it. Seeds release directly into the water and drift outward through the forest, carried into distant channels before settling into soft sediment when the river retreats again. As the water climbs, the geometry of the rainforest changes completely. Branches that once hung high above dry earth become reachable from below. Fish move into places that were forest only weeks earlier. Piranha feed on fruits dropping from submerged canopy. Catfish navigate among drowned trunks. River dolphins weave through flooded groves with the slow confidence of animals entering familiar territory. Many Amazonian fish species synchronize reproduction to the flood itself, releasing eggs when the expanding forest provides food, shelter, and vast new territory for juvenile survival. The distinction between river and land gradually loosens until it becomes difficult to say where one ends. Water fills hollows between roots, spreads through bamboo thickets, and enters old animal trails beneath the trees. Caimans follow the expansion inward, hunting among submerged root systems in terrain inaccessible to human movement. At night, their bodies pass silently through spaces that had recently carried insects, mammals, and dry leaf litter beneath the open air. The flood also changes the physics of large predators. A heavy body becomes lighter in shallow inundation, supported by buoyancy and hidden beneath reflective water moving through dense vegetation. Anacondas cross flooded forest with unusual efficiency during this season, sliding through corridors too tangled for pursuit. The water allows immense weight to travel without effort, carrying muscular bodies through a maze of branches and submerged stems that would otherwise resist movement on land. Far below these forests, another migration unfolds across astonishing distance. Dorado catfish, some reaching 6 feet and 200 pounds, time their journeys to the pulse of rising water. They travel from Andean headwaters toward the Brazilian estuary and back again, a round trip of approximately 7,200 miles, the longest freshwater migration known on Earth. The flood opens pathways through the basin like temporary arteries, connecting distant regions into one seasonal circulation. At the height of inundation, the Amazon ceases to behave like a river bordered by forest. The forest itself becomes aquatic. Fish pass beneath leaves, seeds drift beside predators. Mammals swim through former clearings. Everything moves through the same slow, expanding body, carried together inside a landscape that spends part of every year becoming water. Along certain river margins, the water appears almost motionless beneath floating plants and overhanging grass. Nothing breaks the surface except drifting leaves and the slow widening circles left by insects touching the current. Beneath that stillness, weight settles into the mud with extraordinary patience. The green anaconda, Eunectes murinus, is the heaviest snake on Earth. Adult females regularly exceed 150 pounds, and confirmed individuals have surpassed 17 feet in length and 200 pounds in weight. Accounts from remote floodplains describe larger bodies still, immense snakes seen crossing shallow water or coiled beneath branches, though many of those encounters vanished into memory before formal measurement could ever reach them. Unlike vipers or cobras, the anaconda carries no venom. Its body is built around pressure rather than poison. Thick muscle wraps around prey in successive coils, not to shatter bone, but to narrow the space available for breathing. Each exhalation leaves the chest slightly more compressed than before. The lungs expand less fully with every attempt to inhale. Blood circulation becomes increasingly difficult. The process is quiet, almost absent of visible violence, unfolding through gradual physical certainty rather than sudden injury. Stillness offers no release. The coils do not loosen when movement fades. The snake simply maintains pressure, conserving energy while waiting for the body inside its grasp to fall entirely silent. In this manner, the anaconda behaves less like an active pursuer and more like part of the landscape itself, a force that closes slowly once contact has already occurred. Water transforms the snake's immense mass into advantage. On land, a body of that size moves with heavy effort. In shallow, flooded margins and slow channels, buoyancy lifts much of the weight away. The animal becomes unexpectedly fluid, able to turn and accelerate through submerged vegetation with far greater ease than any terrestrial predator of comparable size. Much of its life unfolds in this half submerged state, where water supports the body and concealment becomes nearly complete. The anaconda hunts through ambush rather than pursuit. It may remain nearly motionless for hours, sometimes longer, with only nostrils exposed above the surface. Heat-sensitive receptors along the lips detect the infrared signatures of warm-bodied animals approaching riverbanks to drink or cross. In darkness, where ordinary sight carries little meaning, the snake reads temperature instead, distinguishing living bodies against cooler surroundings through minute differences in emitted heat. Its prey ranges widely across the flooded forest. Capybaras, the largest rodents on Earth, can exceed 140 pounds and still fall within the anaconda's reach. Caimans, deer, wading birds, and other mammals moving along the margins also become vulnerable when water narrows the distance between predator and shore. Medical and scientific literature contains confirmed accounts of attacks on humans as well, not from territorial aggression or pursuit, but from the simple biological fact that a large mammal entering shallow water resembles other prey the snake has taken before. The danger of the anaconda rests in its refusal to hurry. It does not charge through the forest or announce itself through sound. It waits beneath surfaces already darkened by tannin and sediment, existing quietly within places animals must eventually approach. The river holds its shape long before another body enters the water beside it, and long after that body has moved away, the snake often remains exactly where it was. Voices travel across the river before the animals themselves appear. Sharp barks, whistles, hums, and abrupt chattering calls echo through the flooded margins, passing between tangled branches and drifting over still water. The sounds belong not to birds or monkeys in the canopy, but to a predator moving low through the channels in coordinated groups. The giant river otter, Pteronura brasiliensis, is the largest member of the weasel family on Earth. Adults can approach 6 feet in length. Their bodies built for water with dense fur, broad tails, and webbed feet that push through current with remarkable control. Along the Amazon, they are known as Lobo do Rio, the river wolf, a name shaped less by appearance than by behavior. They hunt together, defend territory together, raise young together, and move through the waterways with the collective awareness of highly social animals. A family group may contain as many as 20 individuals. At its center is usually a dominant breeding pair, surrounded by offspring from several generations, sometimes joined by unrelated adults that remain within the territory. Their communication is unusually elaborate for aquatic predators. Researchers have documented at least 22 distinct vocalizations, each associated with different behaviors, warnings, reunions, or hunting coordination. The river around them becomes filled with layered sound, carrying instructions between bodies, often hidden by vegetation and distance. Their diet reaches across much of the basin's predator hierarchy. Fish form the core of their feeding, including piranhas and heavily armored species that require precision and force to subdue. They also prey upon crustaceans, small anacondas, and juvenile caimans. Few predators in the Amazon routinely hunt other predators across so many categories. The otters move through the aquatic system not as scavengers or opportunists, but as active regulators of it, shaping the populations around them through constant pressure. When threatened, the group behaves with extraordinary confidence. Field observations have recorded giant river otters confronting full grown jaguars near riverbanks, not scattering into the water, but advancing together in loud, coordinated aggression until the cat retreats from the shoreline. A solitary otter remains vulnerable to large predators. A family unit becomes something far more difficult to challenge. Within the water itself, almost nothing consistently succeeds in hunting adult groups operating together. Their position at the top of the aquatic food web is balanced against a fragile recent history. During the 20th century, the dense, velvety fur of the giant river otter became highly valuable in international trade. Hunting pressure intensified across the basin until some regional populations collapsed by more than 95%. Entire waterways fell silent where family groups had once traveled daily. Only after legal protections and conservation efforts expanded did small recoveries begin in protected regions of the Amazon. The ecological effects of their absence proved measurable. In areas where giant river otters disappeared, fish communities shifted unpredictably, invasive species spread more easily, and the balance of aquatic predation altered throughout the system. Their presence influences not only prey abundance, but the structure of the river's living networks. The otters feed, compete, patrol, and communicate in ways that ripple outward through countless smaller interactions beneath the surface. Yet even this apex exists within only one layer of the basin. The Amazon does not arrange danger in isolation. Water, shoreline, roots, branches, mudbanks, and canopy all carry their own dominant hunters, occupying different heights and depths while sharing the same narrow world of river and forest. A narrow Amazon channel can contain more active predators within a few vertical meters than large sections of open ocean spread across immense distance. The river compresses life tightly together, arranging hunters above, below, beside, and within the same corridor of water and forest until every layer of space becomes occupied. In the open sea, predation is often separated by depth and geography. Surface hunters patrol coastlines while deep ocean species remain far below in darkness, inaccessible to most other animals. Vast expanses of water lie between one danger and the next. The Amazon organizes itself differently. Here, the divisions collapse inward. The water column may be only a few meters deep, yet nearly every level contains a separate form of predatory life operating simultaneously. Along the riverbed move electric eels and giant catfish, sensing through voltage, pressure, and chemical traces drifting through sediment-heavy current. Freshwater stingrays settle into the substrate itself, hidden beneath fine layers of sand and silt until the outline of the body disappears entirely. Midwater schools shift with quick metallic flashes as piranhas circle through suspended shadows. Near the margins, anacondas rest in flooded vegetation while caimans float at the surface, eyes and nostrils barely separating from the dark water around them. Giant river otters pass through all these layers at once, diving, surfacing, and twisting through submerged branches with coordinated precision. The structure continues upward beyond the river. Above the overhanging canopy, harpy eagles patrol openings in the forest with wings broad enough to move silently between giant trees. Their talons exceed the length of a grizzly bear's claws and close with enough force to seize monkeys and sloths directly from branches. Along the river margins, where mammals descend toward the water to drink or cross exposed ground, the eagle's height becomes another hunting dimension layered above the current below. At the banks themselves, jaguars move through mud and vegetation with unusual affinity for water. Unlike most big cats, they swim readily and frequently hunt near river edges where prey density concentrates. Their killing method differs from lions and tigers. Rather than suffocating prey through throat pressure, jaguars often pierce directly through the skull with a bite strong enough to penetrate bone. Field observations have documented them, dragging caimans from shallow water onto shore, carrying armored reptiles and jaws built for crushing force rather than prolonged struggle. Closer still, within roots, leaves, and fallen vegetation, smaller predators continue the pattern. The Brazilian wandering spider, Phaneutria, emerges primarily at night and moves actively along the ground instead of remaining suspended in webs. Its venom ranks among the most medically significant of any spider. Nearby, the Amazonian giant centipede can reach 12 inches in length, using venomous claws to overpower insects, amphibians, rodents, and even bats caught during low flight near cave walls or branches. None of these animals occupy the basin separately. They overlap constantly inside corridors, sometimes narrow enough for a person to throw a stone across from one bank to the other. Water, mud, canopy, and root systems become stacked layers of simultaneous predation, each occupied by organisms evolved for a specific position within the same confined environment. The Amazon does not present a single dominant threat waiting in isolation. It functions instead as an interlocked predator system, where movement through one layer places the body within range of several others at the same time, all sharing the same dense living strip between forest and river. The most painful encounter in the Amazon often begins with an ordinary step. A foot enters shallow water near a canoe landing or sandy bank, presses downward into soft sediment, and touches something already resting beneath the surface. There is no chase, no visible warning, no movement noticed beforehand through the clouded current. The riverbed itself suddenly answers. Freshwater stingrays of the family Ptomatrigonidae are responsible for more hospital admissions in Amazonian river communities than any other animal encounter, including snakes. More than 30 species inhabit the basin, found nowhere else on Earth. Their ancestors once belonged to marine lineages that entered ancient inland waterways millions of years ago, before the rising Andes cut northern South America away from the sea. Isolated permanently in fresh water, they evolved into forms unique to the Amazon and its surrounding rivers. Unlike many ocean stingrays that rest visibly against pale coastal seafloors, Amazonian species disappear almost completely into sediment. Their flat, disc-shaped bodies settle into sand and mud until only a faint outline remains beneath the water. In clear conditions, the shape might still be visible. In the suspended silt and tannin-dark margins of the Amazon, it vanishes entirely. The animal becomes part of the river floor itself, indistinguishable from the substrate around it. The sting is defensive rather than predatory. A person stepping directly onto the concealed body triggers an immediate upward reaction. Along the tail lies a serrated spine coated in venomous tissue. As pressure compresses the ray from above, the spine drives upward into the source of contact. The motion is fast and automatic, more reflex than deliberate attack, a biological response refined through millions of years spent vulnerable beneath larger animals moving through shallow water. Medical descriptions of the injury are unusually consistent across river communities and clinical reports. The pain is often described as overwhelming and prolonged, radiating outward from the wound site in waves that can persist for days. The venom damages local tissue, and deep punctures carry additional danger from bacterial contamination in tropical conditions where warm water and organic material surround the injury continuously. In severe cases, tissue near the wound can die slowly over time, turning a single moment of contact into a lengthy recovery. Communities that have lived beside the Amazon for generations adapted not by eliminating the danger, but by learning the river's hidden habits. In many areas, people entering shallow water shuffle their feet across the bottom rather than lifting and stepping normally. The motion pushes buried stingrays gently aside before enough downward pressure can trigger the defensive strike. It is practical knowledge carried through repetition and memory, passed between generations, not as formal instruction, but as part of daily movement along the water's edge. The stingray occupies the precise zone where human activity concentrates most heavily. People fish there, wash there, pull canoes onto shore there, and cross narrow channels there. The same shallow margins that feel safest because they are close to land contain animals concealed by the same murky conditions that hide everything else in the basin. The hidden floor of the Amazon is not empty ground beneath the water. It is inhabited space, layered with bodies adapted to invisibility through stillness and sediment. Some vanish because the river conceals their shape. Others vanish because they are almost too small to notice at all, drifting through the same water nearly transparent to the eye. Some Amazonian threats become harder to comprehend as they become smaller. After the weight of snakes, the layered structure of predators, and the hidden bodies beneath the riverbed, the scale contracts abruptly to something almost transparent, drifting unnoticed through the same current. The candiru, Vandellia serosa, is a parasitic catfish rarely longer than a few centimeters. Most individuals measure between 1 and 2.5 centimeters in length, with bodies so thin and translucent that light can pass through them. In moving water, the animal nearly disappears completely, reduced to a faint, pale thread among suspended particles and drifting organic debris. Along sections of the Amazon, it is known as the vampire fish, though its behavior is more intimate and specialized than the name suggests. The candiru does not hunt in the ordinary sense. It survives by entering the bodies of larger fish. Guided by chemical traces in the water, it locates the gill chambers of passing hosts and slips inside through the narrow openings beneath the operculum. Once there, backward-facing spines along its body anchor it in place, preventing removal while it feeds on blood from the surrounding tissue. The parasite lives protected within another animal's respiratory system, hidden from the river outside, while drawing nourishment directly from the body enclosing it. This biology gave rise to some of the most persistent stories in Amazonian folklore and medical literature. Accounts recorded by travelers, physicians, and anthropologists describe candiru entering the urethra of human swimmers, apparently attracted by traces of urine or ammonia released into the water. The scientific status of these incidents remains genuinely debated. Some researchers question how frequently such events occur and challenge parts of the older reports. Others point to documented medical cases, including at least one peer-reviewed surgical account describing removal of a candiru from a human patient. What remains beyond dispute is simpler and stranger than the argument itself. The fish exists. Its parasitic adaptations are real. It navigates chemically through dark water and survives by entering narrow biological openings. The same river, used daily for bathing, fishing, travel, and drinking, contains an organism evolved specifically around intrusion into living tissue. Once the spines deploy, removal becomes extremely difficult without surgical intervention. The body of the parasite is delicate, but its anchoring mechanism is highly effective. The fish does not possess venom or crushing force. Its danger comes instead from specialization, carried to an unsettling degree. A life strategy refined toward invisibility, access, and attachment. In the open ocean, large predators dominate human imagination because they can be seen as separate bodies moving through space. The candiru belongs to another category entirely. It is not enormous enough to confront directly, nor obvious enough to detect before contact. It operates at the scale of anatomy itself, exploiting vulnerability through minuteness rather than strength. The Amazon allows such organisms to exist because the river obscures boundaries. Water already crowded with sediment, dissolved chemistry, drifting plant matter, and concealed life becomes an environment where transparency functions almost as perfect camouflage. A fish no larger than a fingernail can pass unnoticed through the same channels occupied by dolphins, catfish, caimans, and anacondas, surviving through concealment, so complete that uncertainty itself becomes part of the animal's reputation. Not every hidden danger in the basin acts immediately. Some pass into the body quietly and remain there for years, carried invisibly through ordinary life, while damage accumulates slowly beneath the surface. In many Amazonian settlements, the most dangerous visitor enters quietly after midnight. It does not rise from the river or emerge from flooded vegetation. It arrives through cracks in walls, from thatched roofing, from the dark spaces above sleeping bodies where warmth and breath gather beneath still air. The assassin bug, including species such as Rodnius prolixus, moves almost entirely at night. Across much of the Amazon basin, it carries Trypanosoma cruzi, the microscopic parasite responsible for Chagas disease. The insect itself is small, usually no wider than a thumbnail, with long legs and a narrow head adapted for piercing skin and drawing blood. In dim light, its movement is delicate and slow, more like drifting than crawling. The bug is guided toward sleeping humans by exhaled carbon dioxide and body heat. It feeds most often near the face, particularly around the mouth and eyes, where skin remains thin and exposed during sleep. This behavior gave rise to the common name kissing bug, though the mechanism of infection has little to do with the bite itself. While feeding, the insect defecates near the wound. The parasite lives within that waste material, not within the saliva entering the skin. Infection usually occurs afterward through ordinary unconscious movement. A sleeping person rubs the irritated bite area, touches the eyes, or drags contaminated material across broken skin. The parasite enters through mucous membranes or the small opening left by the bite, passing silently into the bloodstream. The act completing infection is not dramatic or unusual. It is the same absent-minded motion that accompanies countless nights of ordinary sleep. The first phase of Chagas disease often passes unnoticed. Some people experience mild fever, fatigue, or symptoms resembling a brief flu-like illness that resolves without treatment. Many develop no symptoms at all. There is little reason to seek medical attention, and in remote river communities, access to diagnosis may already be limited. The parasite remains inside the body while outward life continues normally. Over years, and sometimes decades, Trypanosoma cruzi enters a chronic latent phase. During this period, it gradually colonizes cardiac muscle tissue, damaging the heart slowly enough that the process remains invisible for much of a person's life. Approximately 30% of chronically infected individuals later develop severe complications, including enlarged heart tissue, dangerous arrhythmias, and progressive heart failure. Symptoms often emerge 20 to 30 years after the original infection, when the underlying damage has already become difficult or impossible to reverse. Chagas disease kills approximately 12,500 people each year, more deaths than any venomous animal except snakes. Yet, it occupies far less space in popular imagination than the larger predators of the basin. Teeth, scales, and visible force hold attention more easily than microscopic parasites moving silently through blood and tissue. What makes this danger distinct is the absence of immediate sensation. There is no visible wound announcing catastrophe, no violent encounter separating before from after. The parasite enters quietly through an ordinary night and remains hidden within the body while years accumulate around it. A person may fish, travel rivers, raise children, and grow older carrying the infection without awareness, while microscopic organisms continue reshaping the heart cell by cell beneath the surface of daily life. The Amazon contains many forms of concealment. Some dangers disappear beneath water or mud. Others vanish inside time itself, moving so slowly through the body that the boundary between infection and ordinary existence becomes almost impossible to perceive. Gold in the Amazon rarely appears as glittering veins cut cleanly through stone. Much of it exists as tiny particles scattered through river sediment, mixed into mud carried downstream from ancient geological layers. Extracting those particles requires a process both simple and devastating. Across heavily mined tributaries, miners known locally as garimperos mix liquid mercury directly into wet sediment, where the metal binds to gold and forms a soft amalgam that can later be heated. The mercury vaporizes into the air while traces of the metal remain behind in water, soil, floodplain, forest, and the bodies of living things. Once mercury enters the basin, it does not disappear. It moves quietly through the biological structure of the river itself. Microorganisms absorb microscopic traces suspended in water and sediment. Small fish consume the microorganisms. Larger fish consume the smaller fish. Each step concentrates the metal further until predators near the top of the food chain carry mercury levels far higher than the surrounding river that produced them. The process follows the logic of accumulation with almost mechanical precision. A giant catfish moving through deep channels may contain concentrations many times greater than the organisms it consumed. Arapaima, river dolphins, giant otters, and other long-lived predators absorb mercury continuously over years, storing it within muscle, tissue, and organs as the food web slowly magnifies contamination upward through the system. For many indigenous and riverine communities, fish are not occasional food, but the central foundation of daily survival. In isolated stretches of the basin, there may be no practical alternative source of protein. Families eat river fish once or twice every day, relying on species that have sustained human populations for thousands of years. Recent studies published in journals, including The Lancet, documented blood mercury concentrations in some heavily affected communities reaching levels up to 8 times higher than international safety thresholds established by the World Health Organization. The effects emerge gradually. Chronic mercury exposure damages the nervous system, disrupting coordination, memory, and motor control. In children, developmental impairment can alter cognition and neurological growth during the earliest stages of life. Communities living near heavily mined tributaries have demonstrated measurable neurological differences when compared with populations inhabiting unmined watersheds elsewhere in the basin. Nothing visible announces the contamination. The fish appears healthy. The flesh smells normal when cooked over a fire beside the river. The water itself continues reflecting trees and sky with the same muted brown surface. Mercury carries no obvious taste or color. Detecting it requires laboratory equipment capable of measuring concentrations invisible to ordinary perception. Since 2019, illegal gold mining activity has intensified dramatically across sections of the Amazon, expanding into indigenous territories and remote waterways previously protected by geography or law. Temporary mining camps spread along river margins, bringing engines, dredges, fuel, and mercury deeper into tributaries that remained comparatively undisturbed within living memory. During flood season, the contamination disperses outward through channels, wetlands, and submerged forest, entering ecosystems far beyond the immediate mining sites themselves. This form of danger moves differently from venom or predation. It enters the body through ordinary nourishment, accumulating molecule by molecule over years until the damage reveals itself long after exposure began. The river carries the contamination invisibly through everything connected to it, embedding industrial chemistry inside one of the oldest biological systems on Earth. Long before Mercury entered these waters, another ancient force was already moving upward through the food chain, carried through flesh and survival across millions of years of uninterrupted evolution. Long before engines crossed the Amazon or satellite maps traced its tributaries from orbit, a slow inhaling sound already echoed across flooded channels at night. It came from a fish rising through dark water to breathe air, breaking the surface with a hollow gulp that carried through the forest like the opening of an old wooden door. The Arapaima gigas, is among the largest freshwater fish on Earth. Adults commonly exceed 200 pounds and reach lengths greater than 2 meters, while historical records describe confirmed individuals approaching 15 feet. In Brazil, it is known as the pirarucu, a name rooted in indigenous languages and attached to the fish for centuries before scientific classification placed it within evolutionary history. That history extends astonishingly deep into the past. The Arapaima belongs to a lineage that has remained largely recognizable for more than 23 million years. Its ancestors inhabited this basin before the Andes reached their present height, before the river reversed direction across the continent, before the modern Amazon existed in anything resembling its current form. Entire landscapes changed around it, while the fish itself persisted with relatively little alteration. Its body reflects an ancient design built for warm, oxygen-poor water. Unlike most large fish in the basin, the arapaima cannot rely entirely on dissolved oxygen passing through gills. It must rise to the surface regularly, every 5 to 20 minutes, depending on conditions, and inhale atmospheric air into a modified swim bladder functioning much like a primitive lung. The sound is unmistakable in quiet water. Experienced fishers learn to detect the rhythm of surfacing breaths from remarkable distances, locating the animal by sound before seeing even a ripple. Because of its immense size and strength, the arapaima has traditionally been hunted with harpoons rather than hooks. A hooked fish of that scale can tear free or overturn small boats in confined channels. Harpooning requires patience and close observation, waiting for the brief interval when the fish surfaces to breathe before striking downward through the water. The surface of the arapaima appears armored. Each scale consists of a hard, mineralized exterior layered over a flexible, collagen-rich interior arranged in complex, overlapping patterns. Materials. Scientists studying the structure, including researchers at institutions such as MIT, found that the scales resist penetration with extraordinary efficiency while remaining bendable enough for movement. Piranha bites that would shred most fish glance harmlessly away from the layered armor. The scales absorb force rather than cracking under it. Combining rigidity and flexibility in a structure, engineers continue trying to imitate synthetically. Despite its size, The arapaima hunts with surprising subtlety. It feeds on fish, crustaceans, and smaller animals near the water's edge using rapid suction strikes. The mouth opens suddenly, generating a pressure wave that pulls prey inward almost instantly. In many attacks, the water surface barely moves before the target disappears beneath it. For much of Amazonian history, the species seemed inexhaustible, yet the same adaptation that allowed survival through millions of years now leaves it vulnerable. Because the fish must surface regularly to breathe, humans can locate and target it with relative ease. In heavily fished regions, populations declined rapidly within only a few generations. Some waterways where arapaima once surfaced constantly now hold none at all. The fish survived shifting continents, inland seas, and geological upheaval spanning epochs. What threatens it most arrived recently, carried not through evolution or climate, but through concentrated human presence along the riverbanks of an ancient basin still shaped by much older forces. The direction of a river can feel permanent when seen on a map. Water descends from mountains, crosses lowlands, and reaches the sea with such consistency that it appears inevitable. Yet, the Amazon has not always moved eastward toward the Atlantic. For much of its existence, northern South America drained in the opposite direction entirely. More than 65 million years ago, the Nazca tectonic plate began pushing beneath the South American continent. The collision lifted the Andes gradually upward, not in a sudden upheaval, but through immense geological pressure accumulating over epochs. As the mountains rose higher, rivers that once flowed west toward the Pacific encountered an increasingly insurmountable barrier. Drainage slowed, water backed against the growing wall of stone. East of the rising Andes, enormous volumes of trapped water spread across the continent and formed a vast network of shallow lakes, wetlands, and inland seas known collectively as the Pebas system. For millions of years, much of what is now western Amazonia existed not as a river basin, but as a warm brackish expanse stretching across low tropical plains. Sediment drifted slowly through broad open water where forests, marshes, freshwater channels, and marine influence blended together into an environment unlike any modern landscape on Earth. The Pebas system left traces everywhere beneath the basin. Marine fossils appear deep inland where no ocean exists today. Sedimentary layers preserve shells, ancient aquatic organisms, and chemical signatures associated with brackish coastal environments rather than river channels. The ancestors of modern freshwater stingrays entered this inland sea from marine habitats long before the basin fully drained. As geological change isolated them from the ocean, they adapted permanently to freshwater life and never returned to saltwater again. For millions of years, the accumulated water remained partially trapped behind an underground geological structure called the Purus Arch, an ancient uplifted barrier crossing central South America beneath the developing basin. Around 10 million years ago, that barrier subsided sufficiently for drainage to reorganize catastrophically eastward. Water that had once pressed toward the Pacific began carving a transcontinental route across the continent toward the Atlantic Ocean. The Amazon River, in something closer to its present form, finally emerged. Evidence for this reversal was discovered almost accidentally. Geologists studying sediment transport patterns in the basin identified ancient zircon crystals buried within Amazonian deposits. Some of these mineral grains were between 1.3 and 2.1 billion years old and originated from mountain ranges no longer standing in their original form. Their distribution revealed that earlier rivers must once have transported sediment in directions opposite to modern flow. The basin itself preserved the memory of vanished landscapes inside microscopic crystals carried across immense distances. The Amazon has reversed direction at least 3 times during its geological history. Each reorganization transformed habitats across an entire continent, separating populations, reconnecting waterways, and forcing species to adapt to entirely new systems of current, chemistry, and migration. The river seen today is not a static structure, but the latest arrangement in a much older sequence of continental reshaping. Many organisms still inhabiting the basin descend from survivors of all these transformations. Electric fish, freshwater stingrays, and ancient catfish lineages persisted through inland seas, tectonic uplift, climatic shifts, and repeated reversals of flow that would have erased younger ecosystems entirely. Their bodies carry evolutionary continuity extending far deeper into time than the river's present course across the continent. Some of those ancient catfish still move through the deepest channels of the modern Amazon, growing to dimensions large enough that early explorers struggled to describe them accurately at all. Most of the Amazon visible from a canoe or riverbank is only the surface expression of something far larger moving underneath. Beneath the drifting sediment, beneath reflected clouds and floating vegetation, the main channel descends into trenches deeper than many continental seas. In its narrowest, constricted sections, where current concentrates and scours the bottom continuously, the river reaches depths approaching 100 meters. No sunlight survives there. Even at midday, the lower channel remains permanently dark. The descent is not gradual in every location. Certain sections drop sharply beneath the surrounding river floor, carved over immense stretches of time by concentrated flow and seasonal pressure. The water moving through these trenches carries sediment dense enough to extinguish visibility completely long before depth alone removes light. A diver entering the channel would lose sight of their own body almost immediately, suspended inside fast-moving darkness without horizon or reference point. Within this environment lives the giant Piraeba catfish, Brachyplatystoma filamentosum. Confirmed individuals exceed 10 feet in length and weigh more than 400 pounds. The body is long, muscular, and pale beneath the river, with sensory barbels extending from the mouth like flexible antennae probing current and chemical traces invisible to human senses. Historical accounts from fishing communities describe enormous specimens capable of overturning canoes or dragging nets downstream, and peer-reviewed reports document fatal attacks involving people who fell into deep water where large individuals were present. The Piraeba migrates across astonishing distances. Adults travel from deep sections of the central Amazon toward Andean headwaters, thousands of miles upstream, before eventually returning again. Over the course of a single year, some individuals cover more distance than many terrestrial predators move during an entire lifetime. They navigate not through vision but through chemosensation, vibration, and pressure detection along the lateral line running the length of the body. Every disturbance in the current carries information. Every shift in dissolved chemistry becomes part of an invisible map extending through darkness. Human understanding of the deep Amazon remains remarkably limited. Sustained scientific diving in the main channel is nearly impossible due to zero visibility, unstable currents, submerged debris, and chemical conditions that degrade equipment rapidly. The river bottom is functionally unexplored, not because of distance from civilization, but because the environment itself resists observation. Sonar surveys and trawl studies provide fragments of information, yet large sections remain biologically uncharted. The limited evidence collected from these depths reveals communities adapted completely to life without light. Some organisms possess vestigial eyes, reduced almost beyond function. Others navigate through pressure waves, dissolved compounds, or electromagnetic sensitivity. The conditions resemble deep ocean ecosystems in sensory logic, even though the water above them is comparatively shallow. Darkness in the Amazon does not require abyssal depth. Sediment and current accomplish the same erasure of vision within far less vertical space. The lower channel feels detached from ordinary geography. Forest, sky, and weather continue overhead, while an entirely separate world moves beneath them, operating through systems of perception humans barely experience directly. It is a place where sound, chemistry, vibration, and electrical fields replace sight as the primary architecture of existence. The deep river remains largely beyond human familiarity, but the margins of the basin are known intimately by the communities living beside them. In the shallows, where flooded vegetation meets warm night water, another ancient predator waits in conditions far easier to reach and far easier to underestimate. After sunset, the surface of the Amazon changes character completely. Shapes lose their edges. Floating branches merge with reflection and shadow until the river becomes difficult to separate from the darkness hanging above it. In this narrow boundary between water and night, the black caiman begins to move. Melanosuchus niger is the largest member of the alligator family on Earth and the dominant predator of the Amazon basin's surface waters. Confirmed individuals reach lengths of 20 feet, and historical reports from earlier centuries describe specimens even larger, though many were never formally measured before being hunted. Its body is broad and heavily armored, with jaws capable of crushing turtle shells and gripping large prey with immense force. The black coloration covering the animal is not simply visual appearance, but functional camouflage refined for nocturnal hunting. Against the river at night, the caiman becomes extraordinarily difficult to distinguish from driftwood, floating vegetation, or the dark water itself. Only slight movement reveals that the shape resting motionless near the surface is alive. The animal uses the meniscus of the water as concealment, allowing nearly the entire body to remain submerged, while only the eyes and nostrils break the surface. During daylight hours, black caimans often remain inactive along muddy banks or partially submerged shallows, where heat from the sun raises body temperature gradually. Their hunting activity intensifies after dark. As the forest quiets and river traffic diminishes, they begin patrolling channels, flooded margins, and canoe routes with slow, deliberate motion almost impossible to detect from a distance. The position of the eyes on top of the skull allows the animal to remain mostly underwater while observing the world above the surface. At night, torchlight reflected from those eyes produces a distinct red-orange glow. Experienced guides traveling through flooded forest count the reflections silently before approaching a shoreline, sometimes seeing dozens scattered across the darkness at once. The riverbank that appeared empty moments earlier resolves suddenly into a field of waiting predators. Throughout much of the 20th century, black caimans were hunted intensively for their hides. In some regions, populations collapsed by more than 99% as commercial hunting expanded across the basin. For decades, the species approached disappearance in heavily exploited waterways. Legal protection, beginning in the 1970s, gradually reversed the decline. Populations recovered across large sections of the Amazon, and the animals began reclaiming territories abandoned during the height of the hide trade. As a result, riverside communities today encounter larger numbers of black caimans than many previous generations experienced within living memory. The animals increasingly occupy waterways near fishing settlements, transport routes, and floodplain villages where human activity overlaps with suitable hunting habitat. Night fishermen in narrow wooden canoes often share the same channels, with predators weighing hundreds of pounds, moving silently beneath reflections of trees and starlight. The black caiman does not need speed in the way open water predators do. It relies instead on stillness, proximity, and timing. Prey animals approaching the water's edge frequently remain unaware of its presence until the final instant, when explosive acceleration breaks the calm surface in a burst of force and spray. A person traveling the Amazon after dark occupies the same shallow layer of water the caiman evolved to dominate. The river at night contains bodies almost invisible against its surface, increasing again after decades of protection and spreading gradually back through human waterways that once seemed temporarily emptied of them. Yet even the black caiman controls only the upper skin of the river. Beneath that same water, another predator moves upward from the ocean itself, carrying marine ancestry thousands of miles into the interior of a continent. Far from any coastline, beyond mangroves and estuaries, and the fading memory of saltwater tides, the Amazon still carries an animal that belongs to the sea. Boats pass through brown current beneath overhanging forest. Villages stand along muddy banks. Rain falls warm across the surface, and somewhere beneath that fresh water, a shark moves through the continent as though the ocean never ended. The bull shark, Carcharhinus lucus, is the only shark capable of surviving indefinitely in fresh water. Most marine sharks lose internal balance rapidly outside seawater. Their cells depend on a precise concentration of dissolved salts and urea to function correctly. The bull shark possesses an unusual physiological system called osmoregulation, allowing its kidneys, liver, and rectal gland to actively control the chemical composition of its bloodstream as surrounding salinity changes. Gradually, the shark transforms itself internally while traveling upriver, shifting from ocean chemistry to river chemistry without losing equilibrium. This adaptation allows it to enter freshwater systems on a scale almost no other marine predator can tolerate. Bull sharks have been recorded more than 2,500 miles inland within the Amazon basin, deep into South America, in water visually indistinguishable from every other muddy tributary surrounding them. By the time one reaches the upper river systems near Peru, there is no sensory indication that an ocean predator could still exist there. The water smells of vegetation and wet earth rather than salt. Floating leaves drift across the surface. River dolphins surface beside fishing boats. Yet the shark continues inland. Near the city of Iquitos in Peru, nearly 4,000 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean and accessible only by air or river, documented bull shark presence has been recorded in connected waterways. The animal crossed an entire continent through freshwater corridors, following channels and tributaries until the ocean became unimaginably distant behind it. Among shark researchers, the bull shark carries a particularly severe reputation. Studies measuring hormone concentrations found testosterone levels higher than those recorded in any other shark species and higher than any mammal yet tested. Biologists remain cautious about assigning behavior directly to hormone levels, yet attack statistics show a consistent pattern. Based on confirmed unprovoked encounters, many shark experts consider the bull shark the most dangerous shark species on Earth, surpassing the great white and tiger shark not in size, but in overlap with human environments. Great white sharks usually remain associated with colder coastal regions and offshore hunting grounds. Tiger sharks often patrol tropical coastlines and deeper marine waters. Bull sharks prefer something different. They favor shallow, warm, murky environments where visibility is poor and shorelines are crowded with fish, mammals, and movement. Estuaries, flooded deltas, river mouths, and freshwater margins form the center of their ecological comfort zone. Those conditions mirror the exact places where Amazonian communities live daily life. People wash clothing near the river edge. Children swim beside anchored canoes. Fishermen clean catches standing knee deep in the shallows. Domestic animals drink from muddy banks at dusk. The bull shark evolved for precisely this kind of water, where sediment clouds, visibility, and movement carries through vibration rather than sight. The ocean contains predators larger than the bull shark, yet almost none possess the ability to abandon salt water entirely and continue inland through the vascular system of a continent. The Amazon became not merely accessible to this animal, but habitable. And still, the bull shark remains a recent arrival compared with another former marine creature living in these waters, one isolated from the sea for so many millions of years that evolution reshaped it into something found nowhere else on Earth. Long before boats crossed the Amazon, and long before rainforest roots stitched themselves across the basin, dolphins already moved through warm inland water where South America now stands. Their ancestors entered a shallow tropical sea connected loosely to the ancient Atlantic, swimming across waterways that no longer exist through environments erased so completely that only geology remembers them clearly. The descendants of those dolphins still survive here. They did not return to the ocean when the inland sea disappeared. The rising Andes slowly altered the continent around them. Rivers reorganized themselves across millions of years, and isolation transformed the animals into something the modern ocean no longer contains. The pink river dolphin, Inia geoffrensis, known throughout the basin as the boto, is the largest freshwater dolphin on Earth. Mature individuals approach 9 feet in length and may exceed 400 pounds. Yet its proportions feel unlike those of oceanic dolphins. Marine species evolved for speed through open water, their bodies streamlined into rigid forms that cut through waves with minimal resistance. The boto lives in a world of submerged branches, flooded forest, narrow channels, and shifting root systems. Flexibility became more valuable than speed. Its neck vertebrae remain unfused, allowing the head to turn independently in ways impossible for marine dolphins. In flooded forest, this flexibility allows the animal to weave between drowned trunks and maneuver through labyrinths of underwater vegetation during the annual flood season. The broad pectoral fins act less like stabilizers and more like articulated paddles, rotating delicately as the dolphin changes direction through confined spaces. The beak also reflects the river's strange demands. At the front are grasping teeth suited for catching fish, but farther back sit rounded molar-like teeth capable of crushing armored prey. River turtles, crustaceans, and heavily scaled fish become part of its diet. The boto evolved not for a single food source, but for a fluctuating environment where prey changes with flood level, sediment, and season. Vision matters little in the water it inhabits. Mud, dissolved organic compounds, and suspended sediment absorb nearly all light beneath the surface. The boto instead perceives the river through sound. It emits rapid echolocation clicks and interprets the returning echoes with astonishing precision, constructing a three-dimensional acoustic image of the world around it. Experiments have shown detection accuracy fine enough to locate coin-sized objects at distances of 15 meters in opaque water. Sound replaces sight completely. Its pink coloration deepens with age, though not uniformly. Adult males often become brighter because their skin accumulates scar tissue from repeated conflict with rivals. Along their bodies are pale marks, crossing lines, and roughened patches from biting encounters that occur during competition over territory and mating access. Beneath the calm surface movements of the Bodo lies an unexpectedly aggressive social structure, especially among mature males. Despite surviving continental upheaval and millions of years of environmental transformation, the species now declines rapidly across large portions of the basin. Since the 1990s, some regional populations have collapsed by as much as 95%. Dolphins are deliberately killed in certain areas for use as bait in catfish fisheries, while fishing nets entangle others accidentally. Mercury contamination from illegal mining spreads silently through prey populations and accumulates within the dolphins themselves. The Bodo carries the memory of the vanished inland sea inside its anatomy. Every flexible movement of its neck, every echolocation pulse through dark water belongs to an evolutionary story that began in salt water and never ended, only changed form as the continent changed around it. Few animals carry a reputation as exaggerated as the piranha. Across films, magazines, and adventure stories, the fish became transformed into a symbol of instant violence, imagined as a creature capable of reducing large animals to bone within moments. Yet in the real Amazon, the truth moves through the water far more quietly, woven into ordinary ecological processes rather than cinematic catastrophe. More than 60 species of piranha inhabit the Amazon basin, though only a small fraction are considered potentially dangerous to humans under unusual conditions. Of those, serious unprovoked attacks remain rare. The most famous species, the red-bellied piranha, Pygocentris naturari, spends much of its life feeding not on healthy mammals, but on weakened fish, carrion, insects, crustaceans, seeds, and fallen fruit drifting through flooded forest. It belongs less to the role of hunter than recycler, returning nutrients back into the river system by consuming what other animals leave behind. Its anatomy, however, explains why the myth emerged so easily. The jaws close with remarkable precision, and the triangular teeth interlock tightly like sharpened shears. Each tooth fits against its opposite partner with almost no gap, producing cuts so clean that indigenous communities have long used piranha jaws as practical cutting tools. Teeth are replaced continuously throughout the fish's life, rotating forward as older edges wear down from use against scales, shell, bone, and tough vegetation. Under specific environmental pressures, piranhas can gather into genuine feeding frenzies. During periods of drought, isolated pools may trap enormous numbers of fish inside shrinking water with little oxygen and diminishing food supplies. Blood or violent movement can trigger rapid collective feeding behavior in such confined conditions. Yet, these events depend on scarcity, overcrowding, and environmental stress. In the vast open channels of the Amazon, where food is abundant and movement unrestricted, the famous frenzy becomes far less likely. The Western image of the piranha owes much to a carefully staged event witnessed by Theodore Roosevelt during his 1913 expedition through Brazil. Local guides, aware of the dramatic story expected by foreign visitors, reportedly enclosed piranhas within a small stretch of shallow water and withheld food for several days. When a carcass was thrown into the enclosure, the starving fish attacked instantly. Roosevelt later described the spectacle vividly, and the story spread internationally, hardening into popular mythology for generations afterward. Meanwhile, daily life along the river continued with little resemblance to those tales. Fishermen catch piranhas routinely using simple hooks and hand lines. In many river communities, the fish is eaten regularly, grilled over fire or simmered into soup. Tourists aboard Amazon riverboats are often invited to fish for them directly from the deck, lowering bait into brown water while guides laugh casually beside them. People swim, wash clothes, and paddle canoes through waterways containing piranhas every day. The enduring terror surrounding the fish has obscured a more complicated reality. Attention fixed itself on visible teeth and dramatic stories, while quieter dangers passed almost unnoticed beside them. The Amazon's most effective threats rarely advertise themselves openly. They operate through infection, concealment, chemical accumulation, darkness, patience, or invisibility. And in this river, one of the most unsettling creatures of all appears almost delicate at first glance, small enough to resemble something imagined rather than real, drifting through the flooded forest like an ornament carried loose from a dream. Across wide sections of the Amazon today, the water still appears unchanged at first glance. Brown currents continue carrying fallen leaves toward the Atlantic. Rain still strikes the canopy with the same soft percussion that has echoed here for millions of years. River dolphins surface briefly beside canoes before vanishing again into opaque water. Yet beneath that familiar movement, the chemistry of the basin has begun shifting with unusual speed. The decline of the Bodo is tied directly to one of the Amazon's most aggressive modern transformations, the rapid expansion of illegal gold mining known throughout the basin as garimpo. Since 2019, mining activity has accelerated deeper into indigenous territories and protected forest reserves that were once buffered by distance and enforcement. Rising global gold prices turned remote tributaries into targets, while weakened oversight allowed extraction camps to spread along waterways that had remained comparatively undisturbed within living memory. The process itself leaves a persistent residue inside the river system. Liquid mercury is mixed with sediment to bind microscopic gold particles together, after which the mercury is burned away. Some escapes into the atmosphere as vapor. Much of it enters surrounding rivers directly, where it settles invisibly into mud, algae, microorganisms, and eventually the bodies of fish. From there, it ascends quietly through the food web. Communities most exposed to this contamination are often those with the fewest alternatives. Along isolated stretches of river, fish are not a dietary preference, but the foundation of survival itself, eaten daily because no practical substitute exists. Families cannot simply abandon fishing when contamination appears, especially when laboratory testing facilities remain hundreds of kilometers away and inaccessible to most settlements. The danger carries no taste, no odor, and no visible mark upon the flesh of the fish brought ashore each evening. At the same time, the river's hydrological rhythms have begun behaving unpredictably. The Amazon experienced historically severe droughts in 2005, 2010, and 2015, each initially described as a once-in-a-century event. Meanwhile, flood intensity across parts of northern Amazonia has expanded significantly, with total inundation area increasing by roughly 26% since 1980. Scientists studying rainfall and atmospheric circulation patterns increasingly describe this instability as a bifurcation of Amazon hydrology, a system becoming simultaneously drier in some regions while flooding more violently in others. For an ecosystem built around timing, this instability reaches into every level of life. The annual flood pulse determines when fish reproduce, when fruits fall into flooded forest, when birds nest along exposed banks, when dolphins move through submerged canopy, and when predators position themselves along changing shorelines. Trees release seeds according to water level. Migratory catfish navigate according to current and season. Caimans time breeding behavior to fluctuating margins between river and forest. A disruption to timing ripples outward through the basin like a disturbance moving through the gears of an immense living mechanism. The Amazon is not merely shrinking or warming in isolation. The synchrony that shaped the ecosystem across tens of millions of years is beginning to drift unevenly out of alignment. And beneath all of it flows a river system, older and stranger than almost any landscape humans now inhabit, carrying within its sediments the memory of vanished seas, extinct mountain ranges, and transformations so immense they altered the biological future of an entire continent. There are forests on Earth that regrew after glaciers withdrew. There are ecosystems rebuilt after volcanic winters, continental droughts, or mass extinctions erased what came before. The Amazon is different. Its history does not begin recently in geological terms, nor does it emerge from a recent reset. The basin has remained continuously forested in some form for approximately 55 million years, preserving a living continuity older than most modern landscapes on the planet. When the earliest ancestors of this rainforest spread across northern South America, grass had not yet evolved into the vast plains that now cover much of Earth. Elephants did not exist. The Himalayan mountains were still rising. Continents occupied positions that would appear unfamiliar on a modern globe. Across that immense span of time, the equatorial position of the Amazon shielded it from the cycles of continental ice that repeatedly transformed temperate regions elsewhere. During glacial periods, enormous portions of North America and Eurasia became hostile to complex forest life. Species vanished, habitats fragmented, and ecosystems collapsed into cold open terrain. Tropical rainforests near the equator remained comparatively stable refuges. Life retreated inward and persisted there while colder worlds spread across higher latitudes. The Amazon accumulated biological diversity not through repeated reinvention, but through uninterrupted survival. That continuity shaped the river's inhabitants across spans of time, difficult to imagine clearly. The ancestors of the piranha swam these waters before the Andes Mountains reached their modern height. Primitive electric fish inhabited the basin before the Amazon reversed direction and began flowing eastward toward the Atlantic. The lineage that would eventually produce the arapaima already existed before the vast inland Pebas Sea drained away and fragmented into rivers, floodplains, and forest. These are not recent species occupying an ancient environment. They are ancient lineages shaped inside an ancient environment together, each responding to countless evolutionary pressures generated by the others around them. Predators refined themselves against prey that evolved simultaneously in response. Defensive armor strengthened as biting mechanisms became more effective. Sensory systems sharpened within water where visibility vanished almost completely. The Amazon's electric fish evolved increasingly sophisticated electrical perception, while neighboring species adapted to detect or evade those signals. Piranha dentition developed alongside prey species such as the arapaima, whose layered scales became so resistant that modern materials scientists still study their structure for inspiration. Botos refined echolocation within submerged forest corridors, while fish adapted to the acoustic landscape surrounding them. Black caimans disappeared into nocturnal water as mammals and birds altered movement patterns in response to ambush predators waiting silently along flooded margins. This coevolutionary dialogue has continued for tens of millions of years, without interruption, extending across a biological network of staggering complexity. Approximately 10% of all known species on Earth live within the Amazon rainforest system. The river itself contains roughly 15% of all known freshwater fish species. These are not isolated statistics gathered independently. They are measurements of the same continuous evolutionary process unfolding across immense stretches of time. Every submerged route, every floodplain forest, every shifting tributary became part of a living engine, generating diversity faster than scientists could document it. Even now, researchers continue identifying previously unknown fish, insects, fungi, plants, and microorganisms hidden within the basin's vastness. And somewhere beneath the surface of this ancient river, among species whose histories stretch backward beyond human imagination, countless forms of life remain unnamed entirely, existing within a world still only partially seen. At the edges of the Amazon basin, maps eventually become uncertain. Tributaries divide into narrower tributaries, channels vanish beneath floating vegetation, and forest closes over the water until even satellite imagery struggles to distinguish river from canopy shadow. Within that complexity, biological discovery continues at a pace that would seem impossible in most other environments on Earth. Scientists estimate that somewhere between 10 and 30% of Amazonian species remain formally undescribed. Entire organisms exist without scientific names, without published anatomical studies, without ecological records, and without any detailed understanding of what role they occupy inside the basin's immense living network. Many have likely interacted with surrounding species for millions of years while remaining completely absent from human knowledge outside local communities. This absence is not limited to obscure microorganisms hidden within soil or deep sediment. In recent decades, researchers have formally identified entirely new fish, reptiles, amphibians, parasites, insects, and venomous invertebrates from river systems already considered scientifically important. The Amazon does not behave like a wilderness, gradually emptied of mysteries through exploration. It behaves like a system whose scale exceeds the pace at which humans can document it. During a scientific expedition along the Javari River in 2019, researchers cataloged 430 fish species in only 18 days of fieldwork. 23 of those species had never previously been described by science. They had existed in the basin uninterrupted while human civilizations rose and disappeared elsewhere, occupying waterways traveled repeatedly by fishing communities and researchers alike. Even more striking are discoveries involving animals already thought to be familiar. Electrophorus varii, now recognized as the most electrically powerful electric eel species on Earth, capable of generating approximately 860 volts. It was only formally distinguished as its own species in 2019. For millions of years, it had moved through Amazonian water, producing the strongest electrical discharge known in any animal lineage, while scientific classification grouped it together with entirely different relatives. The realization carries a quiet, humbling effect. Biological phenomena extraordinary enough to reshape scientific understanding can remain unnoticed inside this river for immense stretches of time. The Amazon conceals complexity, not because it is untouched by observation, but because observation itself becomes overwhelmed by scale, darkness, seasonal transformation, and sheer density of life. New parasitic organisms continue to emerge in scientific literature. New venomous species are identified from flooded forests and isolated tributaries. Large predatory fish, previously assumed to belong to known populations, are separated genetically into distinct evolutionary lineages. In some taxonomic groups, especially insects and freshwater fishes, the pace of discovery has accelerated rather than slowed, as modern genetic tools reveal hidden diversity concealed beneath outwardly similar forms. Even waterways, studied for decades, continue yielding organisms never previously encountered in formal science. Researchers in 2023 described multiple new species of electric fish from tributaries that had long appeared on biological surveys and research maps. The river continues, producing unfamiliar biology faster than comprehensive understanding can stabilize around it. Within the Amazon, unknown life is not a relic of the distant past waiting to be uncovered once and cataloged permanently. It remains active, reproducing, evolving, interacting, and disappearing again beneath opaque water and flooded forest before human attention fully reaches it. And beneath that uncertainty lies a deeper reality still, because the river sustaining all this unnamed life is itself older than almost any living landscape now visible on Earth. By late afternoon, the river begins changing before darkness fully arrives. The surface loses its metallic brightness first. Reflections soften into dull bands of brown and black, and the forest edge slowly dissolves into silhouette. Insects alter their rhythm, bird calls thin out. Heat remains suspended above the water, but the behavioral structure of the basin has already begun to rotate into another state entirely. The Amazon at 2 in the morning is biologically different from the Amazon at 2 in the afternoon. Not quieter, not emptier, but reorganized. Species that remained motionless through daylight begin moving simultaneously, while many daytime animals withdraw into concealment. The river shifts from a visible ecosystem into one governed by pressure waves, heat gradients, chemical traces, sound, and electrical perception. Black caimans emerge fully into this transition. During daylight, they remain comparatively passive, floating near banks or resting in concealed shallows, conserving energy beneath the heavy heat of the basin. After dusk, their behavior changes completely. Hunting activity intensifies through the night and reaches its highest levels between midnight and 4 in the morning. Torchlight, crossing a riverbank after dark, often reveals dozens of red-orange reflections suspended low over the water, each pair of eyes separated by only a few meters. Experienced river guides learn quickly that the darkness ahead is rarely empty. Along flooded margins, anacondas become more mobile during these same hours. Water temperature stabilizes after sunset, and shallow channels fill with the movement of mammals approaching the river edge. The snake navigates through submerged roots and drifting vegetation with almost no visible disturbance, guided partly by infrared sensitive organs lining its mouth. Warm bodies appear against surrounding darkness not as shapes, but as concentrated signatures of heat suspended above cooler water. Deeper below the surface, electrical activity increases across the basin. Researchers measuring background electromagnetic intensity in Amazon waterways have documented detectable rises after sunset as nocturnal gymnotiform fish become active. Hundreds of species begin broadcasting weak electric fields simultaneously, filling the river with layered signals invisible to human senses. Electric eels also intensify hunting behavior at night, their pulses moving through opaque water where vision has little remaining usefulness. The deep channel changes as well. Giant Piraeba catfish leave lower sections of the river and move toward shallower hunting zones after dark. Large individuals have been documented striking at the surface and at animals or objects extending over the river margin. In darkness, the distinction between water and shoreline becomes less stable. The river extends upward through vibration and movement, interacting constantly with the forest hanging above it. Even the sounds overhead belong to another world by midnight. The common potu, nearly impossible to notice during daylight as it imitates broken branches along the canopy, begins calling through the dark hours. The sound carries across long distances of water with unusual clarity, a descending human like wail that 19th century naturalists repeatedly described in expedition journals with visible unease. Alexander von Humboldt himself wrote about the strange emotional effect of hearing it echo across Black River corridors at night. Everything operating in darkness emerges together. Predators overlap across surface, depth, shoreline, and canopy, simultaneously, each adapted to conditions where sight no longer governs survival. By morning, the system will quiet again into another arrangement of life. But during the deepest hours before dawn, the Amazon reveals the form it has practiced for millions of years. Morning arrives slowly along the Amazon. Before engines begin moving on the larger tributaries, before trade boats cross between settlements, the first sounds often come from wooden paddles entering water with practiced softness. Thin trails of smoke rise through the trees. Nets are checked in channels where the current shifts almost imperceptibly from one season to another. Children learn the river long before they learn maps. More than 30 million people live within the Amazon basin, spread across immense distances, connected less by roads than by water itself. Among them are over 400 distinct indigenous groups, many carrying continuous cultural relationships with these rivers stretching back more than 11,000 years. Human history here did not begin with exploration. It did not begin with scientific expeditions or colonial charts. Entire systems of survival, observation, language, and ecological understanding were already ancient before the first European vessel entered the basin. For those who live here permanently, the river is not scenery. It is transportation corridor, fishing ground, drinking source, weather system, memory archive, and daily obligations simultaneously. People bathe in it, travel across it, harvest from it, and bury stories inside it through ordinary repetition over generations. Life unfolds according to flood height, current strength, fish movement, and rainfall timing with a precision that outsiders often mistake for intuition, though it is closer to accumulated empirical knowledge refined across centuries. Communities living beside Blackwater and Whitewater tributaries know that the chemistry of each river changes what survives there. Certain channels carry stingrays during specific flood conditions. Certain fish become unsafe to eat during particular seasons because parasites concentrate within them after water levels recede. Some banks become caiman nesting territory at predictable intervals. Watercolor alone can indicate risk, fertility, current strength, or the likelihood of submerged debris hidden beneath opaque flow. One of the simplest examples remains among the most revealing. In many river communities, people entering shallow water shuffle their feet slowly across the substrate rather than stepping downward directly. The movement pushes buried stingrays aside before pressure triggers a defensive strike. Medical anthropologists and field researchers have documented this behavior repeatedly as an effective injury prevention practice transmitted across generations, not through written instruction, but through repetition, imitation, and memory. The same pattern extends outward through the basin's larger animals. Indigenous descriptions of the boto, electric eel, anaconda, and countless fish species often contain ecological details later confirmed through formal biological study. Long before laboratory analysis explained electrical navigation in knife fish, local communities already understood that certain fish communicated through invisible forces in dark water. Long before zoological surveys mapped seasonal predator movement, hunters and fishermen tracked those rhythms through direct experience. This familiarity does not remove danger from the river. the Amazon remains physically unforgiving, chemically unstable, and biologically complex. But familiarity changes the relationship between human beings and uncertainty. The river becomes legible, risk becomes structured rather than mysterious. Knowledge settles into gestures, timing, route selection, fishing technique, and silence. To outsiders, the Amazon often appears chaotic because its language is unreadable. To the people who have lived beside it longest, the river speaks constantly through color, sound, season, behavior, and absence. And beneath all of that knowledge rests the deeper recognition that this system has been teaching living things how to survive for a span of time almost impossible for the human mind to comfortably hold. 55 million years is longer than human language can comfortably carry. The number sits beyond ordinary memory, beyond mythology, beyond the scale at which most landscapes are imagined. Entire mountain systems have risen and eroded within spans shorter than the continuous life of the Amazon basin. Species that dominate the modern world appeared only recently against that background, brief arrivals inside a system already ancient beyond comprehension. When the Amazon first began assembling into recognizable rainforest, grass had not yet spread across Earth. Open savannas did not exist in their modern form. The ancestors of horses were small forest animals moving beneath dense canopy. The continents themselves occupied positions unfamiliar to a modern globe, and climates across the planet were warmer, wetter, and profoundly different from today. Yet, through all that transformation, biological continuity inside the basin endured. The Amazon survived the Eocene Oligocene extinction event approximately 34 million years ago when global cooling altered ecosystems across much of the planet. It endured the disruptions of the mid-Miocene around 15 million years ago when tectonic change and climatic instability reorganized vast regions of South America. It persisted through the formation of the Pebas Inland Sea, through the rise of the Andes, through repeated reversals of river flow, and through glacial periods that fragmented or erased forests across entire continents elsewhere on Earth. Nothing fully reset the basin. Nothing severed the continuity of life long enough to force ecological reconstruction from emptiness. That uninterrupted survival matters because evolution accumulates through continuity. The Arpema living today carries anatomical solutions refined across more than 23 million years of persistence in this water system. Electric fish lineages diversified before hominids existed at all. The ancestors of modern anacondas moved through flooded forests before the genus Homo appeared anywhere on the planet. Every living organism in the basin is therefore not simply adapted to the Amazon. It is the latest expression of an immensely long selection process operating without interruption across millions upon millions of years. Predator and prey evolved together continuously. Parasites adapted alongside hosts, chemical signals, reproductive timing, defensive armor, venom, camouflage, electrical communication, and migratory behavior all emerged through overlapping evolutionary negotiations, unfolding over geological time. The result is not merely biodiversity, it is density of interaction. In younger ecosystems, biological relationships are often comparatively simple because evolutionary time has been shorter. The Amazon differs because almost every ecological niche has been occupied, challenged, modified, and refined repeatedly for spans of time difficult to visualize. Redundancy developed. Complexity layered upon complexity. Survival strategies became increasingly specialized because the surrounding system itself became increasingly crowded with other specialized life. This is why the basin can feel overwhelming even when viewed scientifically. Every level of the environment is occupied simultaneously by organisms shaped through extraordinarily long evolutionary pressure. Surface water, submerged roots, sediment, canopy, flooded forest, open channel, night activity, dry season retreat, flood pulse migration, chemical signaling, electrical sensing, all of it interlocks into a structure built slowly across 55 million uninterrupted years. The open ocean is ancient too, but much of it remains sparse across enormous distances. The Amazon compresses its intensity into narrow corridors of water and forest, where life stacks densely against itself at every scale. And now, for the first time in that immense continuity, the system faces disruption arriving faster than evolution can answer it. There is a tendency to imagine ancient systems as permanent. Mountains appear immovable, oceans seem endless. A rainforest that has survived tens of millions of years begins to feel beyond collapse simply because it has endured for so long already. Yet endurance is not immunity, and the Amazon now faces pressures arriving with a speed unlike anything in its evolutionary history. The basin survived asteroid impacts that altered climates across the planet. It endured volcanic epochs that transformed atmospheric chemistry. Continents shifted, inland seas formed and vanished, river systems reversed direction, glaciers advanced across distant latitudes, and still the continuity of Amazonian life remained intact. Species adapted, migrated, diversified, and persisted. The thread never fully broke. Then, within the span of a few human generations, the structure sustaining that continuity began changing faster than biological adaptation can respond. Since 1970, approximately 20% of the Amazon rainforest has been cleared. The removed area exceeds the total size of France. Forest becomes pasture. Pasture becomes industrial agriculture. Roads cut through regions once isolated by distance and floodplain. Logging corridors extend deeper into tributary systems, followed by mining camps, settlements, machinery, and fire. Yet the most important consequence is not merely the disappearance of trees themselves. The forest functions as a climatic engine, actively generating part of the rainfall system that sustains it. Every day, Amazonian vegetation releases approximately 20 billion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere through transpiration. Moisture lifted from leaves rises, condenses into clouds, and contributes rainfall across vast regions of South America. The forest helps manufacture its own weather. When large sections disappear, the hydrological cycle weakens. Rainfall declines not only in cleared regions, but also in intact forest farther away. Dry seasons lengthen. Drought intensifies. Fire spreads more easily through ecosystems that did not evolve to withstand repeated burning. The system begins feeding instability back into itself. Climate scientists describe this possibility using the language of tipping points. Current estimates suggest that between 20 and 25% total forest loss may push large portions of the basin into irreversible ecological transition. Beyond that threshold, rainfall reduction and warming could reinforce one another strongly enough that extensive rainforest areas gradually convert into drier, savanna-like ecosystems, even if further clearing stopped. What unsettles researchers is the timescale. Geological change usually unfolds slowly enough for evolution to answer it. The Amazon's earlier catastrophes occurred across immense spans of time measured in millions of years. The present disruption is unfolding within decades. Some predictive models suggest critical thresholds could emerge within the lifetimes of people already alive today. Everything described throughout this river: the electric fish communicating through darkness, the Arapaima lineage surviving from ancient inland seas, the Boto carrying marine ancestry into freshwater, the giant otters regulating predator communities, the flood pulse synchronizing forests and fish reproduction. All of it depends on the persistence of the larger climatic structure surrounding it. The Amazon's danger has often been imagined as something inside the water waiting for human beings: teeth beneath the surface, venom hidden in mud, predators moving through flooded forest after dark. But the first genuinely system level threat in 55 million years did not evolve inside the basin at all. It arrived from outside the river, carrying chainsaws, roads, engines, markets, and decisions made far beyond the reach of the floodplain itself. A river older than grass does not recognize crisis in the way human beings do. It does not pause when forests vanish along its tributaries. It does not mourn the disappearance of species or mark the passing of generations. Water continues moving through channels shaped over geological time, carrying sediment, nutrients, spores, eggs, and dissolved minerals toward the Atlantic, exactly as rivers have always done. The Amazon responds to disturbance without emotion. Species retreat into surviving habitat. Floodplains reorganize. Food webs contract and reform around whatever remains available. Some organisms disappear locally, while others expand into the emptied space. The basin adjusts because adjustment is what living systems do after fire, drought, tectonic upheaval, and extinction. For 55 million years, this process never fully stopped. The scale of time involved becomes difficult to hold in the mind for very long. When the earliest ancestors of the modern Amazon were already draining across South America, mammals had not yet become the dominant large animals on Earth. Vast reptilian lineages still shaped ecosystems elsewhere on the planet. Flowering plants were younger and simpler. Grasslands had not appeared. No savannas stretched across continents because grass itself had not evolved into the ecological force it would later become. Against that background, the entire duration of human civilization becomes startlingly brief. Agriculture emerged only around 12,000 years ago. Cities appeared later still. Industrial society occupies a fragment so small that beside the Amazon's history, it resembles a pulse of light rather than a stable era. The river was ancient before the first stone tools existed. It flowed before writing, before bronze, before the earliest memory preserved in architecture or myth. And long after every modern port city along its banks has weathered into sediment and disappeared beneath new forest or altered shoreline, water will still move through this basin in some form. What is vulnerable is not existence itself. Rivers endure because erosion, rainfall, and gravity endure. Forest eventually returns where climate allows it. Life recolonizes damaged landscapes over enough time. The fragile thing is complexity. The Amazon rainforest contains approximately 10% of all known species on Earth. Its waterways hold thousands of fish species shaped by evolutionary interactions older than most mountain ranges. The basin contains organisms still unknown to science, alongside cultures carrying ecological knowledge accumulated across unbroken generations of human residents. Every predator, parasite, scavenger, pollinator, and migratory fish represents stored biological information refined through millions of years of selection. Complex systems accumulate slowly because each layer depends on countless previous layers already existing beneath it. An electric eel capable of coordinated hunting behavior, depends on prey species evolving alongside it. The armor structure of Arapaima scales emerged through ancient interactions with biting predators. Flood cycles synchronized forests, insects, fish spawning, bird nesting, and seed dispersal across immense spans of time until entire ecosystems began functioning like interlocked machinery. When complexity collapses, survival may continue, but simplification follows. Forest can become scrubland, diverse waterways can become biologically thinner, rivers supporting fewer specialized organisms. Recovery, if it comes at all, unfolds across timescales far beyond human institutions or recorded history. The Amazon does not require humanity in order to persist. Its deepest continuity was established long before our species appeared. Yet, the living version, now being altered, layered with 55 million years of accumulated relationships, required more time to assemble than Homo sapiens has existed at all. That imbalance remains quietly immense, hanging over the river like geological weather. Before a canoe reaches open water, the river is already alive with decisions made by other organisms. Currents bend around drowned roots. Electric fish pulse signals through opaque channels beneath floating vegetation. Stingrays settle beneath soft sediment near the margins where feet enter the water. A caiman drifts almost motionless beside reeds darkened by flood cycles older than recorded history. Somewhere below the surface, pressure waves move outward through muddy water, detected by bodies evolved to navigate without sight. Nothing pauses because a human being arrived. The Amazon is not defined by isolated danger. No single predator explains it. Every organism exists inside a chain of responses built over 55 million years of uninterrupted interaction. The river became what it is through accumulation, adaptation, layered over adaptation until the entire basin functioned as a living system of relationships. The Arapaima's scales answer ancient biting fish. The Boto's flexible neck answers flooded forest corridors tangled with submerged branches. Electric eels evolved in darkness where light rarely travels far enough to matter. Even the hidden stingray buried beneath river sediment reflects millions of years spent surviving in shallow margins crowded with movement. Every adaptation belongs to another adaptation beside it. Nothing evolved alone. The open ocean unsettles people through distance and emptiness. A horizon can remain vacant for hours before suddenly containing something immense. The Amazon creates a different feeling entirely. Here, everything exists close together. Predators overlap vertically through narrow layers of water, mud, roots, and canopy. Venomous invertebrates, parasites, reptiles, fish, and mammals occupy the same confined geography, often concealed until the final moment because visibility itself is limited. The river does not pursue, it does not hate, it simply continues expressing patterns refined across geological time. To enter it is to step briefly inside a process already underway long before human civilization existed. For the people who have lived beside these waters across thousands of years, survival never depended on domination, it depended on attention. Attention to watercolor during changing seasons, attention to spawning cycles and breeding territories, attention to which tributaries carry stingrays during dry months, and which channels become dangerous after sunset, attention to submerged roots hidden beneath muddy surfaces and storms building far upstream beyond the visible horizon. Knowledge accumulated slowly because the river demanded slowness. The careful foot shuffling technique used while wading through shallows, the timing of fishing routes, the understanding of where not to anchor after dark, all emerged from sustained observation repeated across generations. The Amazon rewards familiarity, not by becoming harmless, but by becoming readable. That distinction matters. The river remains powerful whether understood or not. Black water still conceals movement. Floods still rearrange shorelines. Electrical pulses still move invisibly through submerged darkness. Yet people who know the basin travel through it differently, carrying memory shaped directly by the rhythms of the place itself. And that memory still survives. More than 30 million people continue living within the Amazon basin. Hundreds of indigenous nations remain connected to its waterways and forests. Canoes still cross mist-covered channels before sunrise. Fish still break the surface beneath overhanging branches, while the current carries leaves eastward toward the Atlantic, exactly as it has for ages beyond counting. The river is still moving, and so is the knowledge required to live beside it. Even now, while cities sleep and clouds drift over continents, the Amazon is still in motion. The river never truly stops. During the dry season, it narrows and exposes pale sandbars along the margins, revealing roots and mudbanks hidden months earlier beneath floodwater. Channels tighten. Fish gather in deeper pools. Tributaries shrink into winding corridors beneath overhanging forest. Then the rains return again from the Atlantic, and the basin begins another slow inhalation. Somewhere in that darkness, an arapaima is rising toward the surface. Its body moves upward through warm black water older than human memory, and for a brief instant, it breaks the surface to breathe air into the primitive lung hidden within its body. The sound carries softly across the river, a hollow gulp followed by ripples spreading outward into the night. Its lineage has been performing this act for 23 million years through inland seas, tectonic upheaval, and river reversals that reshaped an entire continent. Elsewhere, beneath suspended sediment thick enough to erase all light, an electric eel is reading the world through electricity. Pulses move outward from its body and return altered by muscle, stone, drifting debris, and the faint heartbeat of fish buried below the riverbed. In water where vision failed millions of years ago, evolution produced another way to see. Near a flooded bank, a black caiman remains almost perfectly still at the surface. Only its eyes rise above the waterline. The rest disappears into darkness, so completely that river and animal seem fused together. It waits, with the same patience carried by its ancestors, long before the Andes reached their current height, long before the Amazon flowed eastward toward the Atlantic. And still, the flood pulse continues. Every year the water rises again, sometimes more than 40 feet, entering the forest until trees stand submerged for months at a time. Fish move between trunks where monkeys climbed during the dry season. Seeds drift for miles before settling into new sediment. Parasites, insects, catfish, dolphins, caimans, and electric fish travel with the expanding water through a flooded world stretching across more than 135,000 square miles. The chemistry of distant mountains travels with it. Minerals eroded from the Andes move grain by grain toward the sea. Organic material from flooded forest dissolves into the current. Entire biological systems migrate through the basin in synchrony with the rise and retreat of water that has governed life here for millions of years. Each minute, approximately 28 billion gallons of fresh water enter the Atlantic Ocean. The force of that outflow pushes ocean water backward and carries Amazonian sediment, nutrients, and dissolved chemistry far into open sea. Even there, beyond the mouth of the river, the Amazon continues shaping environments not originally meant to contain it. The river feels more unsettling than the ocean, not because it is more violent, but because it is more concentrated. Everything exists close together. Darkness, predators, parasites, electrical communication, chemical warfare, migration, decay, reproduction, and survival all overlap inside one continuous living system refined across 55 million uninterrupted years. And tonight, as always, it continues without pause. The water is still moving through flooded forest and hidden channels. Electric fields still pulse through opaque currents. Ancient fish still surface to breathe beneath unseen stars. The river moved before human beings existed, and deep within the darkness, every living thing inside it is still carrying out instructions written across geological time.